The older we get, the less we explain ourselves. Not because we stopped feeling, but because one day we became tired of translating pain into words nobody truly wanted to understand. There comes a point in life when silence feels safer than honesty. You still answer people, you still smile, you still show up. But deep inside, something changes. You stop explaining why you're distant, why you disappeared for a while, why your energy changed, why your heart no longer responds the way it used to. Because after enough disappointment, you realize that not everyone listens to understand. Some only listen long enough to judge. And that realization changes a person quietly. Many people watching this right now are exhausted in ways they cannot describe. Not physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You wake up tired. You carry conversations you never had out loud. You replay moments that hurt you years ago. You overthink simple things because life has taught you that even small moments can suddenly become painful memories. And the hardest part is, most people around you have no idea how much you're carrying. Psychology shows that emotional exhaustion often hides behind normal routines. People still go to work, still reply to messages, still laugh in public, while silently collapsing inside. Because human beings become experts at survival long before they learn how to heal. Some people learned very early in life that expressing emotions only made things worse. So they adapted. They became quieter, stronger, more independent, but also lonelier. And loneliness is a strange kind of pain. It's possible to be surrounded by people and still feel emotionally invisible. Sometimes the people who feel the most alone are the ones who constantly try to make others feel loved, because they know exactly what abandonment feels like. The older we get, the more we realize that life is not always about finding people who stay forever. Sometimes it's simply about learning how to survive the moments when nobody stays at all. And that lesson changes the way we love. When we are younger, we explain everything. We fight for understanding. We chase closure. We desperately want people to see our intentions. But after enough heartbreak, enough betrayal, enough nights spent crying silently into pillows nobody ever saw, something inside us becomes quieter. Not colder, just wiser. Because mature pain no longer screams. It withdraws. Research indicates that emotionally hurt people often stop explaining themselves because they no longer believe explanation guarantees empathy. And honestly, they're right. Some people will misunderstand you no matter how gently you explain your heart. Some people have already decided who you are before you even speak. And eventually, you learn that protecting your peace matters more than defending your character. That realization is painful, but freeing. One day, you slowly realize that constantly explaining yourself is actually a form of emotional begging. You begin asking yourself difficult questions. Why am I trying so hard to prove my worth to people who barely protect my feelings? Why do I feel guilty for needing rest? Why do I apologize for emotions I learned from surviving pain? And slowly, you stop. You stop chasing people who only appreciate your presence when it benefits them. You stop forcing conversations that drain your soul. You stop trying to save relationships where only one person is fighting. And strangely enough, that's when healing begins. Not loudly, quietly. Healing rarely looks dramatic. Most of the time, healing looks like choosing not to text back immediately because you're protecting your energy. It looks like taking walks alone. It looks like sitting in silence and finally admitting that something hurt you deeply. It looks like crying less often. Not because life stopped hurting, but because your soul became tired of carrying grief the same way. Human beings often think healing means becoming happy again. But real healing is different. Real healing means becoming softer with yourself. It means no longer punishing yourself for being human. When someone has been hurt too many times, they begin expecting disappointment everywhere. That's why overthinking becomes so dangerous. Your mind starts trying to protect you from future pain. You reread messages, analyze tones, imagine worst-case scenarios. Not because you enjoy suffering, because your nervous system remembers what betrayal felt like. Psychology shows that repeated emotional pain changes the brain's sense of safety. After enough heartbreak, even peace can feel unfamiliar. That's why some people sabotage good things. Not because they want chaos, but because chaos feels emotionally recognizable. And maybe that explains why so many emotionally exhausted people struggle to relax. Even during calm moments, their mind remains alert, waiting, preparing, bracing for another disappointment. Some people haven't truly rested in years. Not emotionally, not mentally. And eventually, exhaustion changes your personality. You become less reactive, less expressive, less trusting. You no longer tell everyone what you're going through. Not because you're hiding, because experience taught you that vulnerability in the wrong hands becomes a weapon. And honestly, that's one of the saddest parts of adulthood. Realizing that not every heart is safe. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Some people only know how to consume kindness, not return it. One day you stop expecting emotional support from people who repeatedly disappear when you need them most. And strangely, that acceptance hurts less than constant disappointment. Because false hope is exhausting. The older we get, the more we understand that peace is expensive. It costs relationships. It costs attachment. It costs explaining yourself repeatedly to people committed to misunderstanding you. But inner peace is worth that price. Because protecting your mental health becomes survival, especially in a world where everyone is overwhelmed. People are silently fighting battles you cannot see. Money problems, family pressure, emotional trauma, loneliness, fear of failure. And sometimes all of these exist at the same time. There are people who look completely fine, while secretly wondering how much longer they can continue carrying life this way. And maybe you understand that feeling too well. Maybe you've smiled during conversations while your mind was quietly drowning. Maybe you've gone to sleep emotionally numb because feeling everything became too overwhelming. Maybe you've learned how to survive without ever learning how to feel safe. If so, you are not strange. You are not weak. You are a human being who adapted to pain. And adaptation often looks invisible from the outside. The strongest people are not always the loudest. Sometimes strength looks like getting out of bed while carrying invisible sadness. Sometimes strength looks like staying gentle after life gave you every reason to become cruel. Sometimes strength looks like continuing to love people despite knowing how painful attachment can become. That kind of strength deserves more respect. Because emotional survival is exhausting, especially when nobody notices your effort. There is a hidden grief that comes with growing older. You begin losing versions of yourself. The hopeful version. The innocent version. The version that trusted too quickly. The version that believed effort guaranteed love. And mourning those older versions of yourself can feel heartbreaking. But the most painful part is, nobody talks about this kind of grief. There were no funerals for lost innocence. No ceremonies for emotional burnout.
No public acknowledgement for the nights you fought your own thoughts and survived. So many adults walk around carrying silent grief every day. And eventually, they become emotionally tired of explaining wounds nobody can see. That's why silence becomes comforting. Not because silence heals everything, but because silence asks for nothing. No performance, no pretending, no emotional label. Just rest. Research indicates that the human nervous system deeply craves emotional safety. Not perfection, not constant happiness. Safety.
A place where you can exist without fear of judgment. A place where you don't have to translate your pain into something more acceptable for others. And honestly, most people spend their entire lives searching for that feeling. Some search through relationships, some through achievement, some through money, some through distractions. But eventually, many people discover something unexpected. Peace does not come from controlling life. It comes from accepting that not everything can be controlled. That realization changes everything. You stop trying to fix every misunderstanding. You stop trying to save everyone. You stop carrying responsibility for emotions that were never yours. And slowly, life becomes lighter. Not easier, but lighter. Because emotional maturity is not becoming emotionless. It's learning which emotions deserve your energy. The older we get, the more selective we become. With conversations, with relationships, with where our soul feels safe. And that selectiveness is not arrogance, it's survival. People who have suffered deeply often develop a quiet sensitivity to emotional energy. They notice small changes, coldness in voices, distance in behavior, hidden tension in rooms, because pain trained them to stay emotionally alert. But eventually, healing teaches another lesson. Not everything requires your reaction. Not every conflict deserves your explanation. Not every misunderstanding deserves your exhaustion. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is let people misunderstand you. That sounds painful at first, but it becomes freeing. Because constantly trying to control how others see you will destroy your peace. Human beings are complicated. Everyone interprets life through their own wounds, fears, insecurities, and experiences. No amount of explanation can fully control another person's perception. And once you truly understand that, you become calmer. You stop forcing emotional clarity where emotional maturity does not exist. You stop chasing validation from emotionally unavailable people. You stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. And slowly, you begin returning to yourself. That process is beautiful. Painful, but beautiful. Because after years of abandoning yourself to keep others happy, you finally start listening to your own emotional needs. You finally admit when something hurts. You finally allow yourself to rest without guilt. You finally stop treating yourself like a machine that must endlessly perform. And maybe that's one of the greatest forms of healing. Learning that your worth was never supposed to depend on how useful you are to others. Many emotionally exhausted people grew up believing love had to be earned by being helpful, easygoing, strong, selfless. So they became experts at giving, but terrible at receiving. And over time, this creates deep loneliness. Because people become attached to the version of you that constantly sacrifices itself. But when you finally become tired, when you finally need support too, some people disappear. And that realization hurts deeply. It makes you question your value. It makes you wonder whether people ever truly loved you, or simply loved what you provided emotionally. But one day, healing changes your perspective. You realize that losing people who only loved your usefulness is not truly a loss. It's clarity. Painful clarity, but necessary. Not everyone deserves your kindness. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your heart. And emotional maturity means accepting this without becoming bitter, because bitterness is heavy, and emotionally tired people are already carrying enough weight. The older we get, the more we crave simplicity, quiet mornings, honest conversations, gentle people, peaceful environments. Not because life became boring, but because suffering taught us what truly matters. After enough emotional chaos, peace becomes attractive in a way younger versions of ourselves could never understand. You stop needing constant excitement. You begin valuing emotional consistency more than intensity. Because intense people often leave deep scars, but safe people help the nervous system breathe again. And that changes your standards forever. One day, you stop asking, "Do they love me?" and begin asking, "Do I feel emotionally safe around them?" That question changes relationships completely. Because love without safety eventually becomes suffering. And many people learn that lesson too late. Psychology shows that emotional security affects nearly every aspect of human well-being. Sleep, stress, self-worth, trust, even physical health. That's why emotionally unstable environments slowly drain the soul. And maybe that explains why some people become distant as they grow older. Not because they stopped caring, because they became protective of their peace. They no longer have energy for unnecessary drama. No energy for emotional games, mixed signals, performative relationships. Life already hurts enough. People eventually become tired of adding extra suffering to it. And honestly, there is wisdom in that exhaustion. Because suffering teaches clarity. It teaches you who truly cares, who listens, who stays, who only appears when convenient. Pain reveals people, but it also reveals you to yourself. It shows you how much you can survive. There are moments in life where you genuinely believe you will never feel okay again. Moments where grief feels endless, where loneliness becomes physical, where your chest feels heavy for days. But somehow, human beings continue moving forward, quietly, one breath at a time. And that quiet resilience is extraordinary, even if nobody applauds it, even if nobody sees it. You survived things that changed you permanently. And yet, you are still here. That matters more than you realize. The older we get, the less we explain ourselves, because life eventually teaches us a difficult truth. People who truly care will try to understand without requiring endless explanations. And people committed to misunderstanding you would never understand anyway. So you stop exhausting yourself trying to translate your soul to emotionally unavailable people. Instead, you protect your peace. You choose softer lives, softer relationships, softer thoughts about yourself. And maybe healing is simply this: learning how to stop fighting yourself after years of surviving everything else. Maybe healing is allowing yourself to become human again, to rest, to feel, to slow down, to stop apologizing for being emotionally tired. Because you were never supposed to carry life completely alone. No human being was. And if nobody told you this recently, I hope you understand something tonight. The fact that you are still trying, still surviving, still searching for peace despite everything life has done to you, means there is still strength inside you. Quiet strength. The kind that does not need attention to exist. The kind built through pain, through loss, through disappointment, through lonely nights nobody else saw. And maybe the world never fully notices that strength.
It was a shame.